Hello, welcome to my channel, talking about books. This is the second attempt at recording this video because in the first one I realised that the Extract fan was on and it made everything sound a bit crap. If you've not seen my other YouTube video, it's not going to be edited. I've not got a script either. I'm just making these as a hobby because I enjoy talking about books, and hopefully at least a few people find these videos and find what I have to say interesting or entertaining in some sort of way. Yes, I'm talking about The Plague, written by Albert Camus. Pronunciation, I'm not sure, so don't kill me in the comments over that. Yeah, I think that's everything. I will start by saying I wasn't sure how much I actually enjoyed this book because I've always been interested in, well, not always, but recently been interested in philosophy. And I was like, oh, Camus, went into my local bookstore and couldn't find The Stranger or The Outsider. I don't know which it is in the UK, one of the two. But there was this, and it's the other one I'd heard of before, so I picked it up. And I found it more of a struggle than I thought it would be, because it's not an essay. Essays are like written by philosophers can be quite difficult sometimes. It wasn't a difficult read in terms of the language, but I would say if you're looking for something with like overt philosophical themes, these don't like jump out at you. They do, it's like there on the page, but there's a few things that I think went over my head. So this is probably a book that I'm going to turn to in the future. I'm going to start by reading the blurb as well. So, the townspeople of Iran are in the grip of a deadly plague, which spread from rats and now condemns its human victims to a swift and horrifying death. Forced into quarantine in the sweltering heat, each person responds in their own way to the lethal disease. Some resign themselves to fate, some seek blame and revenge, and a few, like the unheroic Dr. Roux, join forces to defy the terror. Written just after the Nazi occupation of France, The Plague is a taut, visceral depiction of resistance against a seemingly uncontrollable evil. So, the things that jumped out to me about this book is, well, firstly, I thought more than anything else, it was really interesting character study on the different approaches one could have to this sort of situation. And obviously I've just read the blurb out, it was written about the Nazi occupation of France. And more recently, I'm recording this in 2024, so it's been a few years since COVID's been a big thing, but more recent times COVID and lockdown. Yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, really interesting character study on how different people sort of internalize and deal with different problems that affect everyone. So the first character, the character that I thought was like the main character, and there's a few, so take that with a grain of salt, because the three main characters, it sort of says in the afterword, the talks about the book, self-inserts of Camus. So Dr. Roux is the most, what's the word I'm looking for? The most typical approach you'd see to someone dealing with a plague or a disease. He's a doctor who fights not for reasons of like compassion, but more because he's optimistic that if he's decent and inspires others to join like the health teams, with dealing with the plague, that in the future things will return to normal. But in doing so, he sort of loses parts of himself. So he's contrasted with another character, and I forget whether it's, I think it's Rambert, again with pronunciations. Sorry if you're French or can speak French and I'm butchering these names. But yeah, Rambert and Dr. Roux both have wives or partners that are outside the city that they're sort of confined to, and Rambert is like obsessive and really distraught over the fact that he can't see his wife and partner, as I'm sure most other people would be, to the point where I think he almost becomes like detached from the victims of the plague, because he's a victim of circumstance. He's not from the city, he's not a local, he's just sort of trapped there. Where, on the other hand, you've got Dr. Roux, whose wife was already ill before the plague broke out and had to leave the city, I think, for treatment at somewhere else, I think. So Dr. Roux is dealing with a very similar situation to Rambert, but in a very different way, where he's not affording himself the luxury of being upset about his wife because there's all these plague victims, which is a very interesting contrast. And this quote sort of highlights this, which I didn't write the page number down, but I took notes on a few things. And the quote's this: "Of course a man should fight for victims, but if he ceases to love anything else, then what's the point in fighting?" And you can apply this to, I think, a lot of different things in life. You need to keep that. I think like this is one of the messages of the book. I mean, there's so many, but you need to have like compassion and something outside of anger, or not anger, but you need to have something in your life outside of fighting for a greater good than just that. I think that makes sense. I think I might just be rambling, so I'm going to move on. I think I've made my point. Again, if you saw the last video, you know that I just sort of ramble. Then when I think I made my point, I'll just move on. So yeah, hopefully I get better at articulating myself as I make more of these, which is kind of the point. Yeah. Another thing about this book is the narrator's identity is sort of kept secret. But it's kind of obvious who it is, I'd say, where at the end, or towards the end, you find out who it is, and I was like, oh yeah, of course. Because the entire book's like written in this sort of impersonal, sort of detached perspective. And one of the characters who I've already talked about has this sort of attitude, and the narrator is Dr. Roux. I'm sure that's, if you're watching this, you've either read the book, and hopefully it's not a spoiler and it won't stop you from enjoying it. But yeah, the narrator is Dr. Roux, and it's kind of obvious who the narrator is because of the way Dr. Roux's described. Yeah. The other notes that I took, I mean, it's existentialist. There's no sort of pattern to who dies. And I'd say I don't know whether this book, someone in the comments who's more educated on this than me could probably tell you whether this book is sort of pro-religion, or that's probably quite reductionist actually, whether it supports finding comfort in religion, or not, because there are religious elements to this book, but regardless of religion or atheism, the plague just kills people, regardless of what faith they have. Yeah, I wrote some characters fill this gap of religion with a sense of duty, like the Doctor, Dr. Rue. Yeah, like I said, this book's so dense with different opinions, themes, and everything, messages, that it's really hard to sort of pick out distinct parts without just directly quoting it, which I could sit here and do. I could just read the whole book, but I'm not going to do that. Like I said previously, the whole book's very like detached. It doesn't really, I don't know how to describe it, but if you've read it, then you know what I'm talking about. It is just detached. You don't feel much emotion reading through it, is what I'd say, as someone who feels a lot of emotion reading books. This is not one of them. Apart from this one section where Dr. Rue, and I forget which other character, goes to like a cliff or like a beach sort of area, and it's just like a few pages of just escape for Dr. Rue, who has committed himself like wholeheartedly to this cause. And it's going to sound like such a simple thing to say, like, but it just links back to this quote that I read out earlier. If he ceases to love anything else, then what is the point in fighting? It also, this book sort of delves on like grief and remembering people, and this is what I've tabbed here. I'm just going to read out this short passage. Tell me, Doctor, is it true they're going to put up a monument to the victims of the plague? So the papers say, a pillar or a plaque. I knew it, and there'll be speeches. The old man gave a strangled laugh. I can hear them already, are dead. And then they'll go and have their dinner. This is like the passage that I found like the most, like it struck me the hardest, because like I said previously, COVID has just happened, and I was fortunate enough to not lose any family members during that time period, but obviously a lot of people did. A lot of people struggled through lockdown, of course they did. But we're getting to the point now where it's easy to forget and sort of trivialize what happened to a lot of people. Yeah, it's hard not to. Well, when I read this passage, then they'll go and have their dinner. It's just like, so I don't even want to explain or try and articulate how it makes me feel. But yeah, moving on is something that a lot of people, well, everyone needs to do at some point in their life after like a loss or grief, but it doesn't mean that you can't still remember anyone that you've lost. Sorry, I don't like I said at the start, this is just going to be me rambling until I become more articulate, but I didn't know what to say about this book, because like I said, it's so dense, it's hard to pick out just one theme to focus on, so I've just sort of rambled for 15 minutes. if anyone's made it to the end, then thank you very much. I think I'm going to end it here. Like I said, no script. I don't know what else to say, really. But yeah, I would recommend it, but I'd say read maybe The Stranger or The Outsider first, depending on what country you're in. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. And I'm probably just going to record my next video straight after this about Giovanni's Room, which will definitely be more put together than this, because this was a very hard book for me to sort of dissect. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. I'm just going to end it here because I'm just repeating myself. So yeah, thank you for watching.